Joining me live is visiting fellow at the United States Study Centre and Sky News contributor Bruce Wolpe. Bruce, a big week in the United States.
A dramatic and historic week in the United States. The impeachment of the president, the third time that it has happened, and he will face a trial in the Senate. The dramatic moment was the split screen of Nancy Pelosi announcing the vote on impeachment in the House floor, and President Trump in front of his base in Michigan in full flight, defending himself and projecting his values and his agenda. And it was just one of those moments that kind of captures the huge divisions in America, the unyielding positions of both sides. There isn't even agreement on the basic facts. You know, you can't agree on the facts, hard to have a dialogue. And so this is going to persist. There will be a trial in the Senate coming up, and this will persist all the way through the election next November.
The president's come out saying you've declared war.
Yes, and he, just preceding the vote, he sent a 6-page letter, which was quite extraordinary in and of itself. A lot of presidents keep this bottled in, and they rage in private. Well, this was rage in public, and he clearly wanted to get it out. And when he went to Michigan, he spoke for 2 hours to his crowd, just stating why he's doing what he's doing. And that's the tenor of the debate that we're going to have. He is very troubled by it, but at the same time, he believes he will be vindicated, that the Senate will acquit him, and ultimately the American people will support him for re-election.
Do you think the Senate will?
Yes, the Republicans have clear control of the Senate. There's been no Republicans who broke in the House. There was no Republican who voted for impeachment. There have been no senators in public who have said that they support convicting the president. The numbers are clearly there. And so it should proceed along the same partisan lines that we saw in the House. There is a discussion going on about what that Senate trial will look like, what the procedures will be. And Nancy Pelosi is held up transmitting these articles of impeachment to the Senate. She's looking for some position. She believes the Senate trial is biased. In other words, the cake is baked, and that they're just going to acquit, and they do it in a pro forma way. She thinks they should take it a little bit seriously. So she's held back transmitting the articles in order to put some light and heat on the Senate to say, well, what kind of trial are you going to have? I think that's caused a little to-do in Washington, but I think that'll be resolved in early January, and they'll proceed around the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th of January with the trial.
Nancy Pelosi thought a lot about the timing of this, and you're starting to see a little bit of frustration in her and her rhetoric.
Yes, she believes that the president, she did not want, a lot of people don't believe this, but she did not want to go down the impeachment road. In interviews earlier in the year, she said, it's too difficult, he's not worth it, too partisan. But when the Ukraine-Trump affair emerged, that really sealed her thinking that something very serious had occurred as far as the president and his actions and his oath of office and the national security of the United States. And she talked with her colleagues, and ultimately they were all together, all but 2 among the Democrats, and she established this expedited process in the House Intelligence Committee, and they went forward. They documented the case, went to the Judiciary Committee, drafted the articles of impeachment, very limited on Ukraine, Trump. It didn't go into Mueller, it didn't go into Russia and all that stuff. And this week it came to the floor, and she really delivered it. And it was an historic time, very difficult for the country. And it may blow back on her. There may be a political payback against the Democrats for doing this, too hyper-partisan, too political. But she believes she did the right thing.
Diplomats are racing to ease tension with North Korea.
Yes. This is something to watch over the next 10 days. There have been 3 summit meetings between Trump and Kim. But North Korea is still under strong U.S. sanctions for its nuclear program, and they want out from those sanctions. The U.S. wants Kim to denuclearize, but he has not given up anything on nuclear weapons. They're at a stalemate, and Kim said to Trump about 2 months ago, we have to move on this. If we don't move on this, you're going to get a Christmas surprise. And that Christmas surprise may involve a new level of testing of a nuclear weapon and or a missile, which would show that Kim wants to break out of any restraints on his nuclear program. So all the goodwill from all the summit meetings may be run into a little testing from North Korea for a very, kind of happy new year from Chairman Kim.
It's been a very interesting relationship, hasn't it, between these two?
Trump loves the idea of having landmark breakthrough diplomacy with one of the most difficult leaders in the world. And there's no doubt that tensions have been dialed down while the 2 were talking. But North Korea is reeling under the American economic pressure. They want relief. Trump hasn't given it. Trump wants nuclear weapons to be managed better. Kim hasn't given that. And Kim has really taken other U.S. presidents to the cleaners on his nuclear program. None have caused him really to back down. And so we're going to face another little moment of truth here as to whether we're going to have diplomacy or we're going to have confrontation.
Now, plenty of parts of the United States are looking closely at what is happening with the US trade deal with China. Have we seen any progress there?
Yes. You know, in the last week, a Phase 1 trade deal was announced, and it will be signed in January. And you can sense a psychological easing in the markets. The stock market in the U.S. is at an all-time high. I think it's a breather for Australia, too. On Australia's, it just creates a better environment for trade in the region. And so I think people are encouraged by it. There's still a lot of work to do, but it's much better to be on a course of working these things through than to have an unending trade war that can only drag down the world economy. So it's really been a good development.
And two-week break now.
Yes. So Washington will be quiet. Happy Christmas to Washington. But when they come back, it's going to be full on. In the past couple of hours, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has invited Trump to give the State of the Union address on February 4th. Now let's think about that date. It is quite possible that the trial of the president in the Senate will be occurring at that time, and the Iowa caucuses will be on February 3rd. So we will have the first round of Democratic presidential candidates in Iowa. We could have the President of the United States in the dock in the Senate, and then he is addressing, with Nancy Pelosi sitting right behind him, the nation and the Congress on the State of the Union 2020. It's just one of those remarkable alignments that comes in from time to time.
It'll be a cracking start to February. And just on the Democratic front,
yes.
Finally, they really need to start 2020 well, don't they? Otherwise, I mean, this rabble, which we've seen a bit of throughout the course of the year, needs to tighten up.
It does need to tighten up, and it will, because the primaries will occur. People will win the primaries. That'll sort of narrow the field. As the year ends, Joe Biden has proved his staying power. He's still leading nationally, but in each state, various candidates are showing their heads. There was a debate yesterday in Los Angeles. Kind of all of them did well. I mean, Biden held his own. Buttigieg was under attack. You know, he suddenly emerged, so Elizabeth Warren and others were taking attacks on him for being too inexperienced and so forth. Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, is also doing surprisingly well, and she may have some traction. So yes, you're right. It's quite a field which is very diversified, and no one's got critical mass. But Joe Biden may prove to be Mr. Resilience as the year unfolds.
All right, we'll watch that with interest, but we'll speak to you next week.
And a happy Christmas to
you. Yeah,
you.
you too, Bruce, to you and the whole family. And we'll hopefully get a full preview of what's going to explode into 2020 in the United States.
It will continue.